Today we're going to be covering Dyatlov Path. I don't know if you guys are going to be familiar with it. Kristen, you didn't know, you didn't even know about this, right? You hadn't heard about it?
I have not heard anything about this. I am like totally in the dark, completely. So
Yeah, I wasn't sure if, so this is one of my favorite cases. Like it's just always kind of gotten to me. I think it's so weird. We'll get into all of like the reasons it's weird, but I wasn't sure if we should cover it because technically it's a closed case. The government shut it down, said like everybody died of hypothermia and maybe an avalanche. So I wasn't sure, does this even really count as true crime? But I just think there's so many questions out there that I do think it qualifies. I guess maybe you can decide at the end. But Kristen, are you big into government conspiracies? I don't remember you ever lecturing me on like the moon landing being fake, but do you have anything you'd like to share?
well, I'm gonna say no, but my fiance is. He's a huge conspiracy theorist. I want to say he thinks even COVID is not necessarily not fake, but like he's not a believer fully. And also like there's other conspiracy theorist things that he's like standing behind, and I'm like, are you serious? I mean, to each their own, but me personally, no, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Are you?
Yeah, I can definitely get into them. I'll enjoy watching them and they'll make me kind of scratch my head, but I definitely like usually don't go down the rabbit hole. I'm not like this is a cover up. The same, I have like a brother who's watched something on Netflix and then like be convinced and he'll be like trying, he'll be on YouTube all night and then he's like messaging me first thing in the morning like, and this is why COVID's not real or like, you know.
Pedro's big on watching YouTube videos too on like Illuminati and stuff like that. And I'm like, are you serious? What? What? But I mean, I could see watching something and it having a major influence on you, or you thinking, oh my gosh, well, that could be real. But I don't know. I'm so skeptical about a lot of things. And it's like, that just doesn't make sense. Or I would need more information. So I'm not easy to like push into believing something. So
I think that's a good segue because I think through a lot of this case, you're going to be saying those exact same things and have those questions because this case is full. It's full of government cover ups, strange lights in the sky. We got freaky deaths. We've got really smart, young, attractive people all sharing one tent, which I thought was going to lead to a lot more drama than did. But really, it's going to be an interesting case. But I just want to start off with let me start off with an apology because not only is this going to be a sort of hard case to cover because it involves between 9 and 10 people, they're also all Russian and I am not Russian. I can barely pronounce things in English, but I did really try. I looked up a lot. I practiced a lot. I don't think it's going to help me much here. I also found that everybody, even people that were pronouncing it in Russian were pronouncing it slightly different, some of these names. So bear with me. I promise I'm doing my best.
I'm super excited to dive into this. So let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm going to dive in. Another thing, like a lot of places where like a lot of the resources I was using, they started off where they like listed out all of these people, all of these names, give you some facts about them. I'm not going to do that because I could not follow it at all. Like once we were really getting into it, I was like, wait, what, who was Dubinina? What? So I'm gonna like, as we're going, I will fill you in. But like the important facts that you need to know is that we're really going to be discussing these 9 hikers. We're going to start off in January of 1959. So most of these hikers are pretty young. They're like under the age of 23. I'll start off with Igor Dyatlov. He's going to be the leader of the group, and he's the one who's sort of planning and leading this journey. And his goal is to reach the peak of a Torten, and that's a mountain in the North Urals of Soviet Russia. And his goal is he's created this group at his college. He wants to take these people up and they're all going to do it. So most of them are in school. The group formed at this college. So most of them are either in school or they've recently graduated. And they're everything from like engineers and physicists. It's like all hard majors. These aren't These aren't kids that are, just there to join a frat or something. So they're also really experienced, like first people. This isn't their first hike. They've also done cold weather hikes. So again, this is January. They're not doing this in the spring or anything. This is supposed to be a really harsh environment. They're trying to challenge themselves. And they're tough. I mean, I got some stories here for you. One of the Yuris, and I say one of them because honestly, there's a few of them in this case. He chased a bear off that was getting too near a campground, like for their campsite, and he chased him off with just a hammer. I think that definitely shows you got to be able to face your fears if you're going to fight a bear practically, right?
Absolutely. I feel like too, they're not beginners because they've gone hiking and things like that before, but this is still an extreme task that they're doing. It's not, this is like a hard thing that they're trying to do.
Yeah, and they're actually trying to like level themselves up. So they're trying to get certified. Dyatlov wants to be a level 3 hiker, and that's the highest you can get in the Soviet Union at this time. So he is purposely going at this time to this particular peak because he wants it to be challenging. And this is really good for them too, or it's good for us because the school says, great, go do this, but you need to document everything. So everybody has a journal, everybody has cameras, and they're supposed to be documenting it so that they can basically prove like, hey, I wasn't just sitting at the end of the mountain, not really doing anything, enjoying a couple of weeks, and now I'm going to get certified. They had to prove all of this. So it gives us a lot of, honestly, like eerie pictures now, but it gives us good footage. And because of all these journals, we kind of get an idea of who these people are, their mindsets, and really the feeling that's going on. They also, just because they're fun, cool college kids, they even kind of make this like daily newsletter to cover like, here's the fun facts of what happened today. They were really having a good time with finding ways to document this. Just some other quick fun facts before we move on. There's 2 women on the trip, so it's mainly men, but the 2 women also have kind of been through some stuff and are very experienced hikers. Zinaida was once bitten by a viper on a hike, and obviously she survived and still wants to hike again, which I think is, good for her. I don't know if I could do it. And then we also have Lyudmila, who was shot by a hunter on a previous hiking trip. So these girls are tough. They've been through some stuff. Maybe they have some bad luck. I don't know if I'd want to go on my next hike with them. These are people that you can rely on.
I would say after getting bitten by a viper and getting shot by a hunter, that would probably be it for my hiking days. I don't know if I'd be trekking back out there.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how much they loved it. And they wanted to do more and they wanted to do harder, harder mountains. And this was just another step for them. And basically everyone's friends again. They went to school. A lot of them have taken trips together previously. A couple of them have even dated. And then there's this other guy, Sasha. So Sasha had planned to go on this trip with another group, and somehow he's like at the base of the mountain, and this has fallen through, and he's not going to get to go with them. And he's a lot older. He's, around 38, and he's got these weird tattoos on him. Like it's not really like a recognizable language. So the group at first is a little like, do we want to let this guy go? But he really convinced them like, hey, this is my passion. I'm also a guide. I've done this mountain before. I have experience. So they let him in, and he does. I mean, he kind of, joins the group. Like he's one of them. From all accounts on the journaling and stuff, he's, having a good time and he's fitting in really well.
If I heard you correctly, you said that Sasha has done this hike before, the same hike, just not in January or something.
I don't know when he did it. He just claims to be really experienced, like one of the best people that you're going to want to take on this trip. So they don't know him. I mean, this is all based on his account. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like he's that weird of a guy. Like they really mentioned that he has these weird tattoos, which like, who am I to judge? I have like a mango tattoo and like a vampire. So people definitely think I'm weird, or I am weird, whatever. So I'm not going to judge, but yeah, it's not like he's, they're not like, this guy's really strange. Like, don't let him on the trip. He seems to be a cool guy. They're having fun with him. it's difficult to even get to the mountain. They had to take 2 trains, a bus, and a passenger bus just to get there. And they're like journaling these accounts where they're young. They don't even have enough money to get there. So some of them are like hiding under the seats in the train and things like that. But they're doing whatever it takes to get there. They get to that last outpost. And so this is like the last town before they're going to, be in the mountains. And there's this one other Yuri Kuntsevich. And he's actually had some health issues, specifically in his joints. And so some people cited as he's having knee issues, some think sciatica, but I think this was kind of an ongoing battle for him. And he just realizes no matter how much he wants to take this hike, it's not going to be a good time for him, and that he's going to have to stay by. He feels that, he's going to get too sick to do the trip while he's there. So this is where he says goodbye to his 9 friends as they go on to the hike. So how would you feel if you were him?
I mean, I would feel probably a little sad and defeated, but he sounds like he was aware of what's going on with his body. And, I assume hiking in the mountains in January is probably not an ideal place to be if you've got joint issues and things like that. So I think, yeah, I mean, sad, defeated or whatnot, but it's probably like he was reading into his own body and what his body was telling him. But if I'm the other people, I'm probably going to be second guessing too. Like, this guy's experienced also, and he's pulling out because, he's thinking he's not going to make it, or he's thinking he's going to be too sick to go on. I probably would have second thoughts too if I'm the other 9 people.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for him, I mean, he's got to feel in some ways like really lucky that he didn't go on this almost cursed trip. But I think he also probably has some like survivor's guilt too. I mean, he could have been there. I definitely think he made the right decision to not go, just because he probably would have put everyone else at risk if his body was like literally shutting down. So I think it's the right decision for him. But so he stays and he doesn't go. But they head out, and they head out on this Mansi trail. So Mansi are these local tribe, and they've already built this path for them. So they're going up the path. It's good weather. They're just having the time of their lives. I mean, they've got like a mandolin, so they're singing, they're playing music, and they're trucking along. And I mentioned they're staying in this really large tent. It's about 14 feet wide, and it fits all of them. And Dyatlov had actually made this, or like altered it, so that he could fit a stove in there that could heat everybody up. And another thing to sort of remember is at this time, there's not like a North Face around. There's not like a place necessarily selling a bunch of mountain equipment for you to wear. So a lot of the stuff that they're wearing is like handmade. Like they've found ways to make the clothes and the boots that they're wearing and sort of reinforce them for these harsh conditions. On the 3rd morning, the weather, it's really starting to take a turn for the worst. And this morning is the last time they actually journal. So it's like the last written account we have is in the morning. They're noticing that it's suddenly getting a lot colder out, and the wind's picking up, and the snow's definitely picking up. We still get a few pictures from this day, and like, to be honest, they look very apocalyptic. I mean, everything's gray. They're pushing through these hostile climates, and they're still trying to get towards this mountain, but they're starting to lose their sense of direction, and they're getting lost because they can't see. So it causes them to deviate west, and they find themselves on the slope of a nearby mountain. And this mountain is known as Dead Mountain.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Yeah, I feel like this is not where you want to like land. But I mean, besides the fact that it's just called Dead Mountain, which is eerie, it's typically not a great place to stay in general. Like, you wouldn't want to, set up camp on a slope of a mountain. And there's a couple of theories why this may have happened. I mean, one of them being just that to get back down to the woods, which would have been a safer place to camp, it could have shielded them from the snow and the wind a little more. They would have to truck back down a mile, which a mile might not seem that much, but with like all the equipment, you've been walking all day, you're already exhausted. It's already cold. To me, that might be a good argument for like, we can fight this wind, like just set up the tent. What Yuri thinks potentially was that Dyatlov said, hey, let's try this. Again, they're out there to try to push themselves, to the max. And so they think that potentially he was like, hey, this is going to be a great experience. Let's go ahead and camp on the slope of this mountain. But we'll see that this really is clearly just a horrible decision. At this point, we know they set up camp because we've seen the tent, and we have the last pictures on the camera, and they're strange. They appear to show some like light in the sky. We don't know what it is. We don't know if it's a camera malfunction, but all we know is that it's a light in the sky, and then that's basically all we know until they start finding the bodies.
Wait, so there was a picture with this strange light?
Yes, there's this strange light, but the problem is there's a couple problems. Sometimes even today, when somebody gets like an orb on their phone and they're like, it's a ghost, or it's an alien, people are quick to be like, that's just a light source, or that's your phone malfunctioning. And now we're talking about 1959, so it's not the clearest of film, and it's not the clearest of pictures. Plus, this stuff has been sitting out in the cold and could potentially have gotten damaged with snow, or whatever the case might be. So the government and the investigators are trying to say like, that's probably just a malfunction in the camera. But it is eerie. It's the last pictures we have. It's all we have, like, round out the story.
Have you seen these pictures?
Yeah, all of these pictures are online. You can get like a ton of these pictures online. We'll post them on the Facebook and on the Instagram, but definitely you're going to want to check these out. Again, they're not that clear, but it's really good to see all the pictures of all the people, just to get an idea. To be honest, like, looking at the light, I'm not like, oh my God, that's definitely an alien, or you know what I mean? It's not clear, but it is eerie and weird that you get other clear pictures, and then this is the one that's in question. So the hikers weren't reported missing for 10 days. And my first thought was like, that's really weird. 10 days is a long time, especially considering that there's 9 people. But one thing that I found out is that it's, you say we're going to be gone for 14 days, but to be safe, you have to be flexible. This isn't like a trip to Hawaii where you got to be back to work in 2 weeks on that Monday. You got to, if it's going to take longer to be safe, you got to let it take longer. So everybody kind of knew if they didn't come back the first few days, don't freak out. But now it's been a few days and these parents are starting to freak out. Where are my kids? So they call the school, and the college sends up some volunteers, and they go look for these hikers, and they can't find them. So that's when real concern kind of came about. And they go ahead, they call the police, who sent some investigators, and the military is actually brought in at this point. So they are going up there really with the idea of like, this is cut and dry. We're going to go find some bodies. They were 100% convinced nobody had survived at this point. And they really assumed that it was going to be some dumb accident that these kids got themselves into on this hard trail.
Could it have also been weather too, or like inclement weather, because it's January too, and it sounds like they may not have had the proper attire. They were kind of putting things together. That could be a contributor too, right? Like the weather.
That's basically what they assume. They assume they just like froze to death somehow, or something along those lines. Like maybe they'll see an avalanche or something like that had occurred. That's what they're assuming they're going to go up and find. So they begin with the campsite, and there they find their tent and all their food and clothes, and even their stove that, again, they used as a heater. And they found that this was sort of strange, that the heater wasn't set up for the night. So they're out there, it's 0 degrees is approximately what it is during the day. So you'd think once they're out camping at night, when it's below 20 degrees, that they're going to want that heater set up. But it's not set up, and they find that there's a giant slash in the tent. And from further examination, they realize somebody cut from the inside out. So somebody was in that tent and wanted out. They wanted out quickly. And one thing that when I, originally heard about this case, I didn't know was that this tent was held together, like the door was buttons. So it makes even more sense to me why, if you need out of there, if you're terrified or something, why you would cut a hole in that tent. Because, it's going to take a while to open up a ton of buttons. It's not just a zipper. But it's definitely weird to the investigators. But what's even more weird is you're frantically trying to get out of the tent and you're leaving. I mean, they're finding these footsteps, and it's very clear that people are in socks or one shoe. I mean, you're so frantically leaving. You're not putting on proper attire for these weather conditions, but they're going down the hill in a very like formal path. Like they're not frantically running around. These footprints aren't all over the place. They're just sort of walking. They're not even running. It's very clear they're not even running. They're just walking sort of in a straight line down the hill.
All 9 of them?
Yeah. They're just calmly walking down, and they don't find other footsteps. Like they can for sure say that there's 8 to 9 footprints going down. And they even are able to prove that like some people are carefully walking into other people's footsteps, which like makes sense. If you're freezing, you don't have shoes on, you're not trying to like walk in fresh snow. You might be trying to walk in the footsteps of somebody in front of you. But if you're so terrified and so frantic that you're cutting your way out of this tent, and you're not grabbing your coat, you're not grabbing all these extra layers, like why are you now suddenly just like casually walking down this hill?
That's creepy. Well, what's even more creepy too is even like just me thinking like logically of it's cold, we're hiking. Yes, we're in the tent. The stove obviously isn't on, right? And why would they even take their shoes off? I'm not a hiker. I'm not an expert in that, but like, why would you take your shoes and, why would you take that stuff off? Even if you're in a tent and it's contained, it's still cold. It's still like freezing. So to take it off, and then like you said, if I'm scared, no matter what I have on, I'm gonna run, right? I'm not gonna casually walk. And even still, if there's 9 of them and they're walking behind each other or even besides each other, if you are terrified, you're gonna run. And if you're not, you're going to be intentional enough to try and step in the person ahead of you's footprints, right? That's creepy.
Yeah, like it's like the two behaviors aren't matching up. They're also really skilled, experienced outdoor people. Like it's not a situation where they're like, maybe we can survive with no shoes on in below 20 weather. I mean, they have to know, well, like the idea has to be like, I need to get out of danger right now, because if I don't, I'm going to die right now. And this is like potentially prolonging my death a few minutes almost. Yeah, I really don't understand the mindset. I do think though, if I was hiking all day, just to like go back to you saying like, why would you take your shoes off? If I've been hiking all day, my feet are sore. Like I do want to take my shoes off. So I do think that if I was in the tent, I think I would be the one railing to turn on the heater, but I do think I would take my shoes off. So it makes sense to me that they would have their shoes off. It makes zero sense to me why they would try to go anywhere without their shoes on as soon as they leave that tent though.
Yeah, but then too, so if something terrifying happened inside of the tent or whatever to make them want to get out, what I guess not understanding is, well, what is the outcome going to be if you're in the cold with no shoes on and no coat? You're going to freeze to death. So it's either take your, chances of running out in the middle of nowhere where no one else is going to like help you and freeze to death, or die in the tent, just, out of sheer fear of whatever it is. That is also like a question mark for me.
Yeah. It's like a lose-lose situation, right? Like
Yeah.
It sounds like they were in a situation where there was no winning. Investigators go ahead and they follow the footprints, and it takes them down that mile hike to the forest edge. And under a large cedar tree, the investigators end up finding the remains of a small fire and the first 2 bodies they'll find. It's Yuri Krivonischenko, and he's 23. And then we have Yuri Doroshenko. And they're both found with no shoes on. They're only in their underwear. Their arms are up and they're clearly like, I don't know. They're just in a really weird pose. But to me, I think just to take a break, because everyone always freaks out and they're like, why are they naked? Like, it's pretty obvious that other people were taking their clothes. So like other people on the team. I don't want to like mislead you, Kristen, because you were looking like, what is going on?
Yeah, I'm confused.
There's a lot of evidence that it's basically like your friend dies, but you're desperate. You need to stay warm too. So I think they took their clothes, and that's why they're even up in this weird pose, like with their arms up, like somebody had just taken their clothes off. So, okay, let's say that part's cracked. There's still like we figured that out. There's still a lot of really weird stuff going on when they find these bodies. So they find that their hands are all scraped up. I mean, they're all torn apart. And when they look, it looks like they were frantically trying to climb this tree, and their skin even all in the bark and stuff. And yeah, they don't know why this is happening. They've taken the time to build a fire. It was just a really strange scene.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How far away from the tent did they find the two Yuris?
This is about a mile, because it's right on the edge. So they're not like in the woods, but they're leaning against a tree, like right on the edge of the woods.
Okay, so I'm thinking in my mind, a mile in the snow with no shoes on. Like that's far to make it, to me, like I would think, in that type of weather.
Yeah, I don't know how they did it. I mean, I think that's just like sheer willpower. Like, I'm going to survive kind of thing. I also just think I don't know, maybe I could power through a little more when I was 22 than I could now.
Well, then too, like I would think maybe adrenaline, right? Like if something is terrifying and you're like super scared, maybe there's some adrenaline there that can kind of push you a little bit further, but a mile,
it's not even just like sheer fear though. Like you're fighting for your life. Like I think you'll surprise yourself when your life's on the line. Still very, very impressive. It's a good point to bring up. But yeah, I think you can push yourself a little more when you know, if I don't, I'm just gonna die. I mean, in the end though, they did die. And so another part that I just thought was really sad was they found that their feet were burned. Like it literally looked like they were so cold. They were putting their feet in the fire just to do anything to stay warm. And later we'll find somebody has like burned pants on. And we think that, yeah, they just were like setting, like you're willing to set yourself on fire. You're so cold to try to stay warm.
That's insane. That's insane.
So some other things that like really haven't fully been explained is that Doroshenko was brown and purple in his complexion, and he had gray foam coming from his right cheek, and then there was gray liquid coming out of his mouth. And he also had this like giant burn on his head. So I mean, I think it'd be a lot to be willing to stick your head into the fire. So we're not sure what happened here. And then Krivonischenko had skin in his mouth, like his own skin is in his mouth, and he has bruises all over his body. They're everywhere. Of course, the government labels this as hypothermia.
That does not sound like, I mean, I'm not an expert in hypothermia by any means, but each victim has different ailments wrong, right? Or things that are like on their body, their hands. One looks like they were climbing a tree. The other has skin in their mouth. Like why? And bruises, and the other has just bruises all over his body. Yeah. Well, I would think hypothermia, if they all had the same, whatever was identified that was wrong, if they were all the same, but it sounds like that was not the case. So we're going to go with, it's probably not hypothermia that killed them.
Well, don't you worry. This is like the most cut and dry group that they find. Like, to be honest, like you can almost say hypothermia for them. let's dig into some more weird findings. So then eventually they find 3 more bodies. They find Igor Dyatlov. So if you remember, he's the leader, and then his girlfriend, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and then Rustem Slobodin. And they appear to all be heading back towards the camp from those cedar trees. So they kind of assume that, they probably witnessed their 2 friends die of hypothermia and said, hey, we're not going to survive this either. We need to head back and we need to try to get some additional equipment, like additional clothes, maybe that heater. I'm sure they were just, trying to do anything to survive. And they're found about 200 yards apart from each other, like just in a line. So I think, I don't know, that part's a little weird to me. And, they're saying like the official report states that they all just sort of died in line walking up and they got hypothermia. But Dyatlov was frozen face up when they found him, and he was holding a birch branch like he was trying to fight someone or something. They don't know, but he was in like a real defensive. Rustem Slobodin had head injuries consistent with someone falling and hitting their head over and over and over again. He had a bloody nose and he had wounds just like all over his face. The skin was actually ripped off of his forearms, and he had bruises on his joints of both of his hands. And typically that indicates that someone's been fighting. He also had a 7-inch long cut on the front of his head, like a deep gash on the front of his head, 7 inches long. But it's hypothermia.
Wait a second. Did they test the branch that is it Igor?
Yeah, Igor Dyatlov.
Did they test the branch to see, did he strike him and that's what caused the 7-inch gash? Or, I mean, like, were they fighting each other?
Well, we don't know because it was hypothermia. I didn't see anything that indicates that they really did much testing. From the beginning, the assumption was that and that's a good point. I mean, they're out there, they're probably losing their minds, maybe Slobodin was attacking or something, but I don't know. And we don't know. And there's still Zina Kolmogorova. She had a baton-shaped bruise on her side. And then they found that there was blood all around her, but for some reason they couldn't determine if it was her blood. So, I mean, clearly there was some indicator that would make them think it wasn't even her blood.
It sounds like this investigation needs a complete do-over. Because if this is closed and this is the findings and this is the conclusion that they came to as to all these people just died of hypothermia, it really doesn't, I mean, I'm not going to say you're making me a believer, but I mean, just from the information that you're sharing, I'm just not, it's not ringing that all these people died of just hypothermia.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really, it's unexplainable, but those ones were all labeled as hypothermia. And now we still have 4. So 4 that haven't been found. And they don't find those other 4 for months. They have to actually wait for like the snow to start thawing. Like basically they wait till the spring and then they finally find these additional 4, and they find them deeper into the woods. They now call it Dyatlov's Pass Den. It's like a den, and because they dug themselves into the ground and they placed branches around them to like protect themselves from the snow. And then they also started a fire, which again, it just kind of takes, time and thought to build a fire. It's not like you're frantically running around freaking out. Like you've said, hey, we need to stop. We need to build a fire. You're spending some sort of amount of time there. Nikolai Thibeaux, he's got major skull damage. We have Sasha Zolotaryov, and remember, he's the weird guy with the tattoo. He has major chest fractures. He's got 8 ribs broken, and they're basically saying like the only thing that they can think of that would cause this is some really immense force, like comparable to like a car crash. And he had wounds on his head that were so bad, there was bone showing. He's also missing his eyes. So he was found with a camera around his neck, and the photos were never released. They claim that there was nothing on it, like those were damaged when the snow was melting, the bodies were underwater, and this got ruined. But like one thing that's brought up is that Yuri, the one who didn't go, he swears he never ever saw that camera. And he really always points to that being like very suspicious. He claims that Sasha had a different camera and that he had never seen this camera. I don't know how I feel about this. Like, I've been on vacation with you, Kristen, and I don't know every single thing you brought.
Right. No, that's
not totally weird to me. But I also think that, like, if you're hiking this long journey, you're probably trying to pack as little as possible. You're sharing small spaces, and not that he was with him the whole time, but he was those first few days. So I don't know if that's really that suspicious. I do really wonder if there's something on that camera. I also think it's weird that he had shoes on and he had a camera. Like, there's a lot of assumptions that he was already standing outside, and we'll get into some of those theories, but that he was already standing outside when whatever went down actually went down. Because again, if you're like cutting yourself out of a tent, you're not even like, well, let me grab my camera. It seemed like he sort of had a jump start, or I don't know. It was just strange. But I mean, he was really beat up too. So it's all really weird. Then we have Milla Duvanina, and these pictures they're frightening, to be honest. She looks like she's screaming when she died, and she just froze in that position of her mouth just like wide open, screaming. And she's missing her tongue, she's missing her eyes.
Hold on, Ashlee. She's missing her tongue,
her eyes, her lips, and there's definitely additional damage to like her facial tissue and her skull bones.
And this isn't just like deterioration or like animals pecking or something like that, because if they had to wait till the spring, my guess is they're kind of like thawing out from the freeze. But like, this isn't normal deterioration of skin, skeletal system, whatever. It's not that, right? This is,
well, so everybody always plays up like this is one of the weirdest parts. Like, people were missing eyes. But to your point, I'm like, I never really paid much attention to it because I always assumed it was an animal. Like, we've seen it in other cases where, it's just natural. Like, they're eating soft tissue. It's an easy area to grab. And some people point out that it's weird that it would only be certain people, because typically those types of scavenger animals will just take and take and take as much as they possibly can. So they kind of point that out. But and even with that, I'm like, hey, sometimes you just get full and you can't carry any more tongue, right? Like, but the one thing that is sort of weird and made me actually start to take this a little more seriously and question it is they find a large amount of blood in Dubinina's stomach, which would, in theory, point to the fact that someone or something removed her tongue while she was still alive. And all of that blood is going into the back of her, into her throat, and she's swallowing it and ingesting it. So that's, obviously that's sort of strange or that's terrifying. The other thing is that some speculate, I can't get like a clear report on this, that it looks like the tongue was like torn out or like removed. Like, it doesn't look like it was eaten. It's not what you typically see when like a scavenger animal has eaten away at a tongue.
So what was the investigators' explanation to what happened to this lady's tongue?
Well, the investigators ended up closing with just basically saying it was probably animals.
Like, that was it. That was their final say.
Yeah.
Like, there were no other.
Yeah. So the official report for her cause of death is internal bleeding from severe chest trauma. So at least these four kind of got, like, they didn't just get hypothermia. They got labeled as having like severe chest trauma and things like that. But it's not like we actually get answers with these answers,
Right.
They also found Alexander Kolevatov's body, and so he's in the same location as them, and he has no severe wounds. Like he literally died of hypothermia, it appears. They don't, it doesn't look like he was pounded into the ground or anything crazy. So it almost leaves you with just as many questions. And again, they're all wearing each other's clothing. So it suggests even in this group that people were dying at different times. And, unfortunately your friend would die and you'd just have to grab their clothes so that you could try to survive a little longer. One of the most mysterious things that's brought up a lot though in this case also is that Kolevatov and Dubinina's, they both of their clothes shows evidence of radiation on them. And the investigation never makes it clear like how much radiation we're talking or any information around it. It just says there's traces of radiation on them.
What does that mean? Like what could have possibly caused that or created that? And then too, is this something that was identified in the winter that this radiation was found, or in the fall? I'm sorry, in the spring?
It's on them and they're not discovered till spring. So, I mean, I think it's almost even weird that they would test for radiation. I mean, maybe Americans have this like idea of like, it's Russian, they're full of radiation. Like, but no, I think it, like in real life, Russia, even you wouldn't assume people would have radiation on them. They're in the middle of the woods, they're not near a nuclear plant or something like that. So I don't know what even made them test it, but some people point to the fact that like some of them had worked in a cleanup situation or had worked with radiation before, but they're all very safe. They're all very smart, and they're not going to be wearing a shirt that they wore to clean up some nuclear spill, 2 years ago. That would have been gone. So it's really, I think it's weird that they're finding radiation on these clothes.
Well, then too, what also is strange to me is that they're testing them for radiation, but like, did they test the dude that had foam coming out of his mouth and gray matter or whatever it was coming up? Did they test that? Did they test, the 7-inch gash on this guy's forehead, to see if Dyatlov hit him with the branch or something like that? How did this lady's eyes get gouged out of her head? I mean, I don't understand how they could test for radiation, but like look past all the other strange things that appear to have occurred. Unexplained things.
Exactly. Like there's so many strange things. I mean, people report like when these bodies come and they're actually being buried now, they're having the funerals for them. And so there's a lot of reports from people in those towns saying that there's like all of their skin was orange and they all had gray hair. So they had like these weird tints to them. And they find that there's some missing cameras and journals, which I don't know if that is weird or not. I mean, it's a big place. Like they could have gone, like those could have gone a lot of places, but it is sort of suspicious. I don't think they ran out of the tent with them. So where did those go? The Soviet government closes the case quickly, and they offer only like this thin explanation saying that the hikers died due to hypothermia because they were inexperienced and that maybe something like an avalanche was at fault. Like, how's your official statement going to be like, maybe an avalanche happened? I mean, there was no signs of it, but maybe an avalanche happened.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was a poorly investigated situation.
Well, we'll get into, I don't think that it was even necessarily that it was like so poorly investigated. I think like the investigators were being stopped with a lot of stuff because, well, let me get into the theories and then we can go over it. Early on, the first theory is that people start blaming the local Mansi tribe. And I assume that throughout history, that's just what we do. We blame the tribespeople with no sort of evidence. And that's what they do. And they find that there's really no signs of there being an attack. I mean, that would be a great explanation for why the hikers fled their tent and, all this damage being done. But overall, they don't find that. They also, I mean, they quickly dismiss the Mansi because they're not known for being violent and there's no evidence of this. And they like, once they're cleared, they help with the search. They're like, hey, we know the area. We want to help. We want to find these people. We want people to be safe. They go ahead, they rule them out. But then investigators, like almost immediately, they shift to, it must have been a violent avalanche. And, you know, the sound of the snow collapsing was just like an early warning to these hikers, and they freaked out and they, you know, they cut their way out of the tent. And then that's when they went sprinting for the tree line. And that, you know, this avalanche was so powerful that it was enough to somehow inflict these injuries and kill the second group of hikers, but not like the first group that they had found. I think this is just weird because, I mean, when you're talking about an avalanche, there's a lot of evidence if there's an avalanche, and like there's no signs of this. I mean, we'll put pictures up of the tent. The tent's not fully standing, but it's not like under, you know, it's not filled with snow. There's also like skis that were in the ground right next to the tent that are still standing upright. Like there's no way an avalanche went through here. And also, if you're running and you're fleeing from an avalanche, I'm going to assume that you're not going to be like sort of calmly going down a straight line trying to get away. Like, again, you're going to be freak the fuck out. You're going to be like, let me get out of here. And I don't see evidence of that. What do you think about the avalanche theory?
I'm going to go with no. Nothing sounds convincing to leading up to it being an avalanche that caused them to flee their tent, to me.
Well, if you don't believe avalanche, would you potentially believe Bigfoot or Yeti?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've gone camping and been scared in the woods. But like, I've never seen anything like that. You know, again, not a conspiracy theorist by any means. But then at the same time, when you hear about stories like this or cases like that, it's like, well, what could have made them, these experienced hikers, what could have made them flee in that way? And, you know, like, again, they didn't run. So were they scared? Like, why cut out of the tent? Why not put your shoes on? Why not grab your coat? And then calmly walk in each other's footsteps to your death, basically.
Right.
It doesn't make sense, but I'm gonna put an X through avalanche.
Not avalanche. The Bigfoot and Yeti theory goes that there is this one sort of weird picture. It's not super clear. A large person is poking out from outside like a tree, like they're poking out, and you can see it. And so some people point to this and claim that this is potentially like a Yeti or, you know, again, a Bigfoot. I mean, I've seen the picture and there's nothing in it where I'm like, oh my God, we finally got proof that's a Yeti. Like that's not what we're seeing in this picture. Some other things that people do point to is that in the newsletter, there's a line, it's like a byline, but there's not much text below it, just saying that, you know, we now know that snowmen exist, which is weird, right? That could be a funny, like almost inside joke. That could be real. They could feel like they've seen something and then they now think that like there's some sort of Yeti out there.
So you're saying there's a line in their newsletter. In whose newsletter is this?
No, because remember that they've kind of made a fun game out of it. They're having to track everything that they do. So they're all journaling personally, but then they also are creating like this daily newsletter of like the things they've seen, the things they've done. You know, maybe like they're highlighting something funny. Like in there's a lot of information. Like it's somebody's birthday. So at one point, like that's in the newsletter, like a shout out, things like that.
And that is clearly stated, and there's no other commentary.
No, there's not really any. Yeah, there's no really commentary along with it. So like we don't know if this is like, and now we know that snowmen are real, or if it's like, and now we know snowmen are real. You know? Those are two different ways to read that.
Like the context, you can't get a feel on what the
Yeah, you can't get a feel. But it's really easy when they're all dead and you're like sitting up there alone going, oh my God, what did they find?
well, I mean, then ah, if you're hiking, and this is just like if your personal thing, right? If you're hiking and you see something and you're like, what is that? Are you going to try and see what it really is? Are you going to, you know, try and get closer to it?
I guess it depends what it is.
But what if you don't know what it is? Like you just you see it and you're like, that does not look normal. Are you going to try and go towards it or go away from it?
You're asking a ghost hunter. Like, are
Okay.
you gonna walk towards the scary thing? Like, I'm out here for the scary thing. Like, if you catch me on a mountain, like, let's be real. I love walks. I do like hiking. I'm not like a mountain hiker though. So, like, if you catch me on a mountain, I'm probably looking for a Yeti before I'm trying to make it to some peak. Like, if I'm being honest. Not that I'm saying this theory is the one. So let's move on. There's more theories.
Okay, let's hear the next theory.
So the next theory is the gulag. So some speculate that prisoners from a nearby gulag went and murdered all these hikers. But it doesn't really make sense. Like the type of people, the type of prisoners housed there would have stole everything. They would have taken every last thing from that tent, like the shoes, the food, anything they could get their hands on. And they didn't steal anything. They just weirdly tortured a group of people. So again, quickly, we can roll that one out. So you want to get to what I would say is, to me, one of the most likely cases, and it's what Yuri actually thinks happened.
And Yuri is the survivor, or the one that didn't go.
Yeah, so this is all based off of because he actually got to go there after the fact. They had him go and start trying to identify things, and because he had seen what they were bringing, those kind of things. So he thinks that the group stumbled onto a testing ground accidentally. And he says when he was up there, he saw fabric that he thought looked like it came from an army uniform. And he later even saw documents, and these have been verified, but the documents kind of state that this investigation started the 2 weeks before it officially started. So it's almost before anybody's gone up and is saying these hikers are missing, they're already talking about and investigating an incident that they shouldn't know have occurred. So let's dig into this particular, the weapon testing theory. And it's popular because hikers a little over 31 miles away report seeing strange orange orbs floating in the sky on the same night that the hikers are suspected to have gone missing. And this theory goes that the hikers hear the blast and they freak out, they run out of the tent, and after the group witnesses the first two die of hypothermia, 3 of them decide to head back towards the tent, and also on the way die of hypothermia, and then the other ones head into the woods and they are hit with another explosion. This doesn't really explain some things. I feel like it explains a lot. It doesn't explain why Sasha was already outside taking photos and things like that.
Because their bodies, when they were buried or before they were buried, it was stated that they were had an orange tint to them and their hair was gray. That I would need some more digging or explanation into why are they, because when you get embalmed or whatever, you do have they do have a tint to their skin color, but orange. And then the hair, what could have caused their hair to turn? I don't know what happens when you experience hypothermia, when you've been exposed to extreme weather and extreme temperatures, or to even temperature changes, how it went from winter to spring. But I could see this as being a possible theory.
I also think nobody talks about this, but I've seen in situations just extreme stress. when someone's been in like a plane and like a plane crashing or something and survived, like sometimes I've seen where they'll get like patches of gray. I don't know that like the whole hair is now suddenly gray, but yeah, they'll get like large patches of gray all of a sudden because it's just like that much stress on your body.
But then too, because Yuri is saying like this could possibly be a testing site that they stumbled upon. And then too, because like you said, the government seemed to kind of get involved and want to protect whatever, they didn't want certain things to get out. They were protecting the storyline of the case, right?
Yeah, they shut the mountain down for 3 years. They didn't let anyone on that mountain for 3 years.
But that's my other question. It's like, if this dead mountain, if it is per se a testing site for like weapons or whatever, or something nuclear, why would it be open? Or even if it was even remotely close to a testing site, why would it be open to people to hike at? You know what I'm saying? Like that, I don't understand.
Well, the only like I'll play devil's advocate with that is like the second you tell people they can't go on a mountain, like, you know what I mean? Like the suspicion's gonna just like, like Area 51 here. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you tell them they can't go in. So now everybody wants to know what's going on there. So I mean, that could be part of it. They're like just hoping nobody comes up there.
Yeah.
Sasha or Alexander or Semyon, you remember that guy? I keep bringing him up. The one who joined later.
The oldest guy.
The old guy. Yeah, we'll call him the old guy. Even though he's only 38. We're a closer age to him than. But the old guy, I guess that's fair. People thought it was weird. Like, why was he so determined to get onto the mountain? Like, he's like willing to go with strangers. He needs to get up there. So a lot of people speculate that he's actually part of the KBG and that he was going there on a secret mission. So either they think he was there to like meet up with a foreign agent, like a foreign agency. So maybe the CIA, or others think that he was there to spy on other Soviet officers. But no matter what, people speculate that Sasha, maybe he heard something and he went outside to photograph it. And then someone sees him taking the photo and decide like he's seen too much. So soldiers come back and get everyone out of the tent. And so the group they go along for about a mile until they hit the tree lines. And then that's when the hikers like have enough. And they're like, we're going to fight for our lives. And they think that potentially, they're fighting for their lives. And this is what leads to their really bad injuries. But they end up, killing the 4 that had the worst injuries. And by the time they kind of get back to deal with the other 5, they've already died of hypothermia. And then they just go back up and somehow magically cover all of their tracks that show that there was another.
Yeah, but my thing is, if you're going to, especially if it's government related, I would think their cleanup game would be a little bit stronger, right?
That's true.
Just completely get all the bodies, all the evidence, and just it vanishes completely. And these bodies are never found. That would be my guess of how the government is going to clean something up.
Well, that's true too, that like, even if like, let's say you don't clean up all the footprints on accident, then you can step in and like tell the investigator to shut up and you like wipe that print away really quick. So, I mean, that could have been what happened. That Lev Ivanon, the chief investigator of the Dyatlov Pass incident, he said, I suspected at the time, and I'm almost sure now, that those bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death. And when he was interviewed, he was interviewed in 1990. He was saying that like due to censorship and security in the USSR, they forced him to abandon like any inquiry on that. And like they insisted that he like strike that from the record. Like he was not allowed to talk about it. And like that was supposed to be like some foolish, like, that was just a glitch on a picture. Don't talk about it.
But it makes you wonder, if they're telling you to shut up about it, it wasn't probably a glitch then. Like, don't draw attention to this because it's just a glitch, but
don't ask about it.
Right.
interesting. I know this is turning into a long episode, and I promise you, Kristen, I'm not going over every theory out there. But I'll just go over two quick more ones. One being very similar, but it being basically drug testing. So instead of like weapons testing, they think they're, looking at like chemicalizing weapons sort of testing. And they think that like possibly somehow they got hit with these drugs and they all basically kind of went crazy. And that's, how everything leads up to that, to the deaths. And then the other one that is kind of brought up, and I think this one's like more of a newer theory. It's kind of leaned upon a lot. It's that it was some sort of unusual weather event known as infrasound. And that's caused by a particular wind pattern that can lead to panic attacks in humans because of low frequency sound waves. And this actually like creates kind of an earthquake inside of your body. So sort of same theory, like this really was just some crazy natural disaster. It made them freak out. It made them, think their lives were in danger to the point that they put their lives in danger.
Wow. That's a lot to ingest, but I'd say of all the theories that you've provided or given or gone over, I'm gonna stick with the only survivor, basically, or the one that didn't go with them, because he has to know more. He was with these other 9 individuals.
I do think I think he's probably more invested in it, and you're gonna try to like read every single thing you can on it. Yeah, you're looking for answers.
Yeah.
If they were my friends, yeah, I would. And he did. He recently died, and he stayed on top of this case up until the day he died. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's all these theories, and it's like every theory fits part of the story, but like nothing completely fits. And even though like some of the really weird stuff, I feel like, maybe there really is an answer, and like maybe we don't know what these bodies like look like out there for months, and just crazy things can happen. But I still just cannot get over, why would you ever leave your tent without proper clothing in those weather conditions? Like, you have to know and feel like, I'm gonna die right now if I don't do this.
I'm not going hiking anywhere. I'm not going hiking anywhere. Period. That's going to be a no.
They did eventually reopen the case about 60 years after the incident. They reopened the case, but they stated that they would only be looking at the possible causes being an avalanche, a snow slab, which is similar to an avalanche, but it's just like large piece of snow, basically, like all going down together, or a tsunami in the mountains. I don't know. I don't know. That just seems very crazy to me, though.
But to reopen the case 60 years later and only like try and see if those were the 3 causes, like why not just open it and rule everything out, not just these 3 things? I mean,
so investigators said in July 2020 that the hikers died of hypothermia after an avalanche or something of similar force pushed them out of their tents and into the cold. So, and basically nobody got answers, and a lot of people still label this as unofficially unsolved. So no matter how much the Russian government claims it's solved and we can all like leave it alone, you see there's still tons and tons of theories.
Absolutely. I could see that this, either they didn't want whatever caused these people's deaths to come out and they just wanted it to be closed. But I don't think this is solved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I have answers. I have a feeling, I mean, when they talk to people in that town, like that outpost and stuff, like it's a huge case in Russia still. I don't think anybody feels like it's completely solved.
Have there been any other similar types of even the weather that they're talking about, like the avalanche or the snow slab or the tsunami, or like, has anything like that been happened again? Has anybody else been? I know you said they closed it for like 3 years, but
so I think it's crazy that you bring that up. So First of all, no, there's been no avalanche. There's no reported avalanche in that particular area ever. It's like not known for avalanches. There's been no proof that there has been one. But I have no information on this. So this is like a cliffhanger. Like, you can all go do your own research. I don't even know the name of it, but I reached out to one of my friends that speaks Russian and I said, please help me with these names. As you can hear, he was of zero help, but he was like, oh, well, don't you know that like something very similar happened? So I have to look into this. Maybe I'll do like a short story on it, but something very similar happened, and not on this mountain, but it happened in Russia. It was a large group of kids. And basically none of them came back, and they're blaming this infrasound on that as well. But it was like a very similar case, and a lot of people, there's a lot of theories in that case too, I guess. Like, a lot of people think it's a government cover-up, but I guess it's like eerily similar. I don't know when it happened. I have no other details, so I'm sorry. I should probably just cut this out.
No, don't. I love this because now I'm curious. I want to know more. That's why I asked, like what if I could get why something happens, to hikers, because that's a risk. No matter what, you're going out into the elements. It's a risk. You're putting yourself at risk by being exposed in that type of weather and stuff. But this happened, something similar happened. Like, I want to know when. We'll have to follow up.
We'll have to follow up because I just got this information last night, so I couldn't look into it, but I guess like nobody's buying that it was like a weather event and hypothermia in this situation either. So we shall see.
All right. Well, we got a cliffhanger. I hope, and I look forward to hearing more about what's you find out about this other event that happened.
Well, I will let you know. And thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that this was clear. Make sure you check out our social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook, 1,000 Miles of True Crime, because I'm going to post all those pictures. And if you haven't seen them, you're going to want to see these pictures. It's just going to make things a little clearer and probably creepier. So thanks again. Please rate and review us. Tell your friends. We really, really appreciate all of you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening.